Brother Smith and Mr. Smith and Mr. Barnaby, I want to ask you this question specifically because it goes along those same lines, but it deals with a very unique group of students. Why is it important now that we have an idea of what design thinking is and how it builds critical thinking skills? Why is it important that we involve our urban students in, especially African American students, in STEM education? What are the benefits that they could get from a STEM education, or even going into STEM in college and eventually into a career in STEM? I'm going to start with you, Mr. Smith.
All right. I always think about, I always came up that we'd say that the jobs that we're preparing our students for today will be obsolete by the time they get there. What STEM education has done and why it's important to uh, particular students in urban areas, students of color, is that we should no longer be teaching math in isolation, science in isolation, all those things in isolation, because that creates those one-track minds. But to show how all those things work together, you're never out of a job. You're never for a position if no matter what I'm doing, I can show how it all works together. And just being able to equip our children and our students with the ability to do that, with the ability to design and plan and create and innovate. A lot of time that takes the book thinking out of it. Your SAT score doesn't really matter to me if I'm in a position where I'm not in a assembly line or I'm just reading gauges. But if I need you to create or innovate something, or if I know that our production is down, or I know that we need to find ways to innovate or build what we're doing to build a better capacity, that STEM education and not being able to just learn in isolation, learn how to critically think, creatively think, and communicate it will create our better students or better leaders for tomorrow. I also think about the number one thing that our kids come in school every day and they're so sleeping tired. It's because they play video games all night. Have you ever seen these kids play video games? They're working together, they're communicating, they're creating, they're budgeting, they're building all of these platforms with all these different people. They don't even know, and they all have one goal of how can we accomplish this. I mean, to me, that's the ultimate STEM education. Like I tell my teachers all the time, if you can create a video game environment in your classroom, you're going to have some of the most successful kids in your building, because everything we want them to do, they're doing it at home by themselves. But we put them in the classroom and say, no, I need you to be able to tell me why X plus B, why is that? So that's why I think it's important to take some of those things and put it into our students to make them better leaders for tomorrow, for jobs that aren't going to be there if we utilize what we're doing now.
All right, to follow up on what Mr. Smith said, I'll start with the word algebra itself. The word algebra literally means to take broken pieces and put them back together. So when it comes to why Black students should be involved in STEM, to put it basically, they're going to be left behind. Literally everybody else are using these resources and everything that STEM involves itself with to create the best economies that they can actually create. And if we don't learn these things to be like the masters of these particular topics, they will be. So now Black students are going to be at the mercy of everybody else who knows these topics. And as Mr. Smith said, that we're going to just be at the position of jobs, as opposed to being the entrepreneurial positions, the leaders, the executives, the managers, the people who make decisions. That's where you want to be, so that we're not in a vulnerable position to be in once those things are created. That's the main reason that I would say that they really, really need to be involved in STEM. IT, cybersecurity, mathematics, even governments are using these things to establish their budgets, to build new and innovative climate technology. Saudi Arabia with their how they're trying to move away from oil into a new resource because that might be depleted in a few decades. They're literally thinking about these things so that, okay, when things change, what are we going to provide for our future generations so that when they get there, they'll be in a position where to take the baton and continue running and maintain the establishment of that economy. So I think about these things in terms of that, where we need to be in positions of power and not in vulnerability, so that we can then build futures for our children. So that when they look back at us, they'll know that, yeah, he was the guy. He let us know. He helped us out. He fixed it. He did his thing. And I respect that.
So let me ask you all this question, and this is going to be a meaty one. So just prep yourself. What role should educators play in helping to encourage their students to get involved in STEM? And then also for those who are maybe educators or who may be mentors or who may, have young people in their family, they may be involved in STEM or maybe interested in STEM. What resources are there out there to help guide students into understanding the importance of STEM and getting into the STEM fields?
All right, I guess I'll start with this one. In terms of the role that educators play in encouraging students to get into STEM, personally, I would say we play the most important role, in fact, more important than anyone else. And I'll tell you why. Because us as educators, we are in a position where we are the gears, the cogs, the nuts, the bolts, the washers. We are the mechanisms that take these concepts of STEM and apply them to real world activities. So parents may not be in a position to know these things, but we do. We are trained in these things, and we have that inspiration and that knowledge on our backs. So it's up to us to really show them that, okay, here's this mathematics, here's this engineering, here's this science, here's this tech. Here's how we're going to use it to the real world. And I would imagine that a lot of you who have students get the same question asked over and over again of, when am I ever going to use this? Why do I even have to learn this? It's not going to help you make any money. Why am I even learning this stuff for? Well, here's why. So it's up to us as masters of these particular subjects to know, one, what these things are, and two, how to go about using it in the real world so that we can create these industries, these tycoons of business, these positions of power where these seemingly boring subjects actually put us in positions where we run things now. Us as the nerds, the geeks, whoever you want to call us. Yeah, we run things because we took the time out to study these boring subjects, as you called it, and now we run it
again. Can I go next, brothers? Can I get in me? This is my 18th year teaching. I'm still in the classroom, the third grade teacher, and I'm over the math for kindergarten, first, second, and third. Meeting with teachers every 2 weeks or 3 weeks. The first thing, you got to be prepared. That's the first thing you want to be able to do. As a teacher, if I'm not prepared on the latest, if I don't know my standards, then it's hard for me to teach those things in fidelity. It's hard for me to teach those things with confidence, and I don't have the enthusiasm that kids look for, and they need that to be engaged and be responsive and motivated. So the first thing I need to do is be prepared as an educator, as a teacher. So I need to do some research and make sure that I'm up on what's the latest and how I make sure I prepare my students correctly. The second, I need to get real. I need to be honest with kids. I know a lot of times, especially kids in inner cities, there's a lot of stuff that they have around. Let's say it's for cell phones. They say, okay, if your parents have old cell phones at home. I did this thing in my classroom. So yeah, we have cell phones we don't use anymore. I said, okay, well, ask for permission and bring them in. So we had all these old cell phones, flip phones, all these cell phones in, right? And the kids, I said, well, what do you notice about this? I want you to see my phone. I got an iPhone 11. And what do you notice about all the flip phones and all those old phones that your parents have? Or even the house phones. Some kids brought in house phones. And they said that, first of all, they're a lot bigger. Okay, so you notice that they're a lot bigger. The second thing you notice is you may not be able to text on those other phones. So I said, there's someone designed the program to be able to do that. And you can do the same thing. This is taking the text a little bit further, making it real. And so they can see that, hey, somebody has made these cell phones. The first cell phone is a lot different than the cell phones that we're using today. The next thing is you want to highlight industry leaders. Sometimes people want to know, like, who are the top people that are doing things. A lot of our kids, they want to know. I mean, if they can't relate to any of those people, they're less likely to make them real, less likely to want to listen to them, or even encourage them that way. And then you want to incorporate online resources. That's Tinker, that's code.org, that's Code for an Hour. There's so many resources and programs out there for teachers that you can use right now for your kids that allows them to express themselves. Powtoon. Instead of doing a PowerPoint presentation, I have my kids do Powtoon. Very simple, but it's teaching them how to be able to operate and become better writers, communicators by using technology. All right, that's enough for me right now. I'm not gonna talk your heads off.
It's all good.
I agree with what he said about being prepared. One thing that I found that a lot of teachers, especially in the math section and secondary ed, they know what they're teaching in the classroom, but they can't relate it outside the classroom. Often my kids, see, I'm the type of person, I love my content. I didn't go to school for a degree in education. I went to school for a degree in math. And then I went my master's in statistics because I love the ideas and the content and the things that it relates to. So whenever my kids ask me a question about how this relates in the real world, I can tell them because I've studied these things. I've dealt with these things. I've done real world problems and applications in my undergraduate study and my graduate study. So being prepared and knowing how these things relate in the real world is the way that we can encourage our kids to get involved in this type of thing. And I talk about statistics a lot because it's the most applicable form of mathematics, in my opinion, in our setting today. Data mining is one of the newest and the most leading forms of in the job setting now that it's coming up. Data mining and doing all that data analysis and that type of thing. It's a growing field right now, and they are trying to get kids involved in coding and data analysis and using things like CodeApp and SPSS and SAS and all those different things, because companies want that. They want somebody that can analyze all that data, project what's going to happen in the future so they can make the most money. And if our students can't apply those tools, then they can be right there making the most money with them. So encouraging them and knowing how to apply these things as educators and making sure those kids have that type of interest in these things. They're not going to have interest in something that you're not interested in. So as educators, we have to be able to influence them and cause them to have an understanding and become interested in the things that we're learning and in the things that we're teaching.
Smith, you want to harp in on there?
Yeah, and just kind of wrapping all up in terms of educators, I think one of the keys that we missed in how we're going to encourage our kids is like, you have to be versed in what STEM education is. And one of the major pieces of STEM education is not only is that creative thinking, is that critical thinking, is that communicating. A lot of times we teach in isolation. If you're a science teacher and you've never created or had a conversation with a math teacher about lesson, you're missing out on major things that your kids can do. I encourage our science teachers at least once a quarter. If you haven't walked into your science teacher across the hall, or down the hall against your grade level and find out what they're doing and how it works into your classes and how it can work together, you're missing out on a major piece. I think a lot of times we do these things and our kids, as they get older, they begin to lose focus because at some point, I'm not that good in math. I'm not that good in science. But if we begin to teach more of it as educators, the more that we can blend these things together and show you don't have to be good in one or the other because they all work hand in hand. And I think to really encourage people, we have to be able to do some of these things on our own as the adult level so we can actually work them into our lessons so our kids can have these opportunities to know what STEM looks like. We use it every day. Everyone every day in some form of your day is using science, technology, engineering, and mathematics at all times. But being like the guys are saying, be able to make that relevant and bring that authentic learning to a student, you're using it, here's why. And guess what? We're going to use it in math class. And when you go to core 2 in your science class, guess what? It just carry on over. So educators, that's what we need to do, be versed in it and learn how we can make it and work collaboratively in our building and outside of our buildings to be able to build that capacity so we can actually encourage our students. This is what true STEM looks like, because you guys know there's a bunch of people out there saying they're doing STEM and still teaching same old science, same old math, and they put a smart board up talking about that's technology. No, man, that's not it. That's not what we don't do STEM like that.
I like that. I like that.
And so talk for a minute, and I'm adding this question. Just talk for a minute. What is, when we talk about science, technology, engineering, mathematics, what is that fluidity that will draw a student in? What is it about STEM that engages a student, I guess is my question.
Okay. I'll start. I'll answer that question first, if you don't mind. I once had a student, he was learning algebra 2, and he obviously was asking where we're going to use this type of information. And so I gave him the example of, let's say that he's on a date with the girl that he likes. Okay, cool. Bill comes in, and the waitress that was hosting them was particularly good, so he wants to tip them. So here's a cool way for you to tip a person 15%. So I showed him that he didn't have to use a pencil or paper or a calculator or anything like that. He could do it all in his head by calculating 10% first, 5% second, add them together. There's your 50%. Bada bing, bada boom. He was like, real? For real? He was so excited. He was like, yo, I didn't even know you could do that, man. So now next time I go on a date, I'll make sure I do that. She sees me, she'd be like, yeah, my boy's smart. So that's the kind of connection that I like to build with these types of people, where that's the harmonious connection that you would see. Math as a theoretical concept, we're just learning the pragmatic aspect of it, and then its applications in everyday life, like tipping a waitress. So that connection definitely draws a lot of hearts and minds and eyes to it, and now they want to learn more. So I got you back.
I think you just made an empirical connection between STEM and love connection. Moving on. So next person.
I mean, he touched on it though, being able to visualize the abstract concepts. He was teaching a concept abstractly, and then he was able to go in and make it a real world situation, and he made it fun and creative. As educators, that's what we have to do. We have to be able to make it real world, make it engaging, make it fun, but also be honest with them and let them know it can be challenging. Sometimes in education, sometimes with STEM, sometimes with our kids in inner cities, there are already just so many barriers. There's already so many rules. So in STEM, you can take some of those rules out, where I can show you I can be creative, I can still be great at math, I can still be great at writing, but I can be able to function in a way that communicates well with all these other people. So you can show them it's a group of people that love the same things that you love already. A lot of our kids already have a tact for math, already have a tact for technology. They use their smartphones like crazy. They're on video games all day, but they don't understand how to get those things. They don't understand the math behind it, or how to get those things to function in real world. And so as an educator, if you can make it real and make it fun and engaging and creative, then you have them. You got their attention. Let's use it wisely.
And I can take that back to what you said about being a musician, because I'm a musician as well. So one thing that I do in pre-cal, when we start talking about things like polar equations, we discuss music production. One of the things that we talk about is microphones, how they're built and how they're created, because if you look at the side of a microphone, you see the form of a polar equation on the side of it. So we relate that back to the different things that are incorporated in music production. If you were to build your own studio, how would you build it? Thinking about the frequency and the waves, sound waves bouncing back and forth in that studio, making sure you get the best and the highest quality sound. The frequencies of your highs, your lows, your mids, all that different type of stuff, relating it to something that they're interested in. So how many kids do we have want to be rappers, want to get in a studio? How many do we have that want to sing? These are things that you can know if they're going to be professional musicians and professional singers. What's going to give me the best sound when my voice is on that microphone? So relating it back to those things in STEM captures their attention and captures their interest. It's just finding something that relates to them, and not just for the kids that love music, just relating it to anything. Kids that love sports, baseball statistics, those types of things. There's several different books written by Josh Tabor and different statisticians about different things. So all types of different resources that we can find to help capture that interest in our students.
It's interesting you bring that up, because years, and that is STEAM. So what's the difference between STEM and STEAM?
So I can take this one, because I actually work in a STEAM school. So we first started off as a STEM school. We had, you have to get the STEM certification, but we're a STEAM school. And just kind of give you a little bit of background. We had a large population of students when we were STEM, but when we added the arts to it, man, our enrollment just exploded. One thing with the STEAM component, like the same thing that we're talking about here, when we added the arts to it, it added a whole different type of kid. But the thing is, when we added that artistic kid, it didn't take away from our kids who were still into the engineering and the woodworking. So each year, we put up a pre-COVID, of course, used to own a musical at the end of the year. It was all students, and that came from the singing of the students, the creation of the costumes. They designed the entire set. I'm talking about the last one we did, The Little Mermaid, and they turned the stage into a whole like underwater thing, to where they were building ships. We're bringing in the technology on how we're going to work the lights. Are we going to do auto dimmers, who's going to work the board? The kids are going to work the board. And so what we've done is we made our art teachers, our course teachers, our robotics teachers, we make them feel just as important as our core teachers. So now if I'm doing a cross curricular with science and math, guess what? I'm bringing in my robotics teacher to figure out what he can add this. If we're in our English classes and we're teaching, trying to, creative thinking, guess what? I'm going to bring in my chorus teacher and all those people and my art teacher to help work with creativity. If we're doing an oratorical contest, why am I not going to go and get my theater teacher when she's teaching the same thing? And we have kids who chose our school specifically for our theater courses. So why wouldn't we combine that? And so what happens within STEAM, you're basically able to reach those kids. And at the middle level, a lot of our kids, that's when they get cool, that's when they, it ain't cool for me to sing it. Knowing just a year ago, you was clapping, sitting crisscross applesauce and singing, you know what I'm saying? So now that middle level, that keeps it there so we can hold on to them, because what we're trying to do is, I need to get you into high school where now we can start getting pathways and you still want to do all these things that you loved doing when you were younger. In those grades. So adding that component of STEAM, that arts component, it doesn't take away, and it fits perfectly in there. And as you say, as teachers begin to buy in, my theater teacher is just important as my science teacher or my math teacher if I'm choosing kids, because a lot of, like, we're a magnet school, we're a choice school. So kids who choose to come to us, they want to be a part of our design process, but they also want to learn how to sing. They want to learn how to act, they want to learn all those different things. So blending all those together just to get more kids and give more opportunities for kids to really be successful in their academic careers.
So what it sounds, what types of training is available for teachers to be able to integrate STEM? And what types of training do they need to be able to integrate STEM or STEAM, either one, into what they do on a day-to-day basis in order to reach that new type of student who needs to deal with these creative and critical thinking juices that are going through their little bodies?
In our school, I guess I'll start off. In our school, one thing that we encourage with our teachers to do is to basically get them introduced to STEM is project-based learning. Like, let's start with the problem. And what you're trying to do is get kids to kind of design their thinking or bring their own experiences to a common. Everybody has totally different experiences depending on what you're talking about. So with problem-based learning and working with other people, you're kind of getting kids to be able to think all those things that we want them to do, to be able to get into it. We in our building, we also use a company called Buck Institute. They're real major in problem-based learning. So we get our teachers to educate them. Of course, you can Google anything, but the key component, I'm always a big fan of this, is finding STEM schools that have magnets and having conversations with those teachers. Teachers love to share. There's a huge site, Teachers Pay Teachers. I can't believe people that pay. I'm not knocking them. I should put me some things on there, but people are paying for things. I'm like, man, I just threw something like that in the trash. Like 10 years ago, I should have saved that if I knew you were paying me $2 for it,
Right.
Reaching out to other educators who are in this field and who are doing it well and just getting insight on, hey, listen, I just want to do something small. Start small. Hey, start where you are with what you have. Then grow it and never be satisfied. Like that's exactly.
So everybody ain't got to run and get a degree in STEM to be able to do this.
Right. Yes. Just do that. So just start there. Reach out to people and go from there.
Right. I would like to piggyback off of what Mr. Smith said when it comes to that. I like to use competition as a way to bring about that training, particularly for the educators and the students as well. So anything that involves a game where there's chance or a winner and a loser. So games like the 24 card game from back in the day. This company called Factile that produces a Jeopardy style type of questionnaire where it gets the students engaged in wanting to beat one another. And some of the old fashioned stuff that we used to do when we were young. So as Black men, we're supposed to know how to play like dominoes or spades or something like that. Those are definitely aspects that bring about training in mathematics and STEM and technology and all of that to produce these kinds of people. So that's something that I would add to his list.
And school districts, I mean, school districts are implemented. They understand the importance. And like you said, we have all these different schools. Like my school's an international baccalaureate school. So on a global scale, we're supposed to not just thinking about your own community, but thinking about how you function as a whole, as a world, as a community. And we can use that to show the kids the connection, how something that we do here in Atlanta can affect kids, people around the world. And we're not in this thing alone. A lot of times we go to study.com. Study.com, it gives us the top 30 high school STEM programs. It lets you know middle school programs that you can look for, things to bring to your school. They give grants to teachers, $1,000 grant to invest in you, to go back and invest in yourself so that you can become aware of some of the latest STEM things that you're doing. I mean, that's so much information. Sometimes it can be information overload. So like Brother Smith said earlier, you may just want to start with what you have and then just build on that. It's a way of thinking. You can just change the way that you view the world, man, the way that you see things, and can change. And you become a better teacher because of that, or a better school teacher because you can see that.
And
I thought it.
Chime in
Yeah,
on that.
Okay, my bad.
One thing that I know that teachers dislike the most is professional development. But yeah, I know we don't like to go to professional development. But in my district, I work with our Cumberland County High School Math Advisory Team, which we're the team that builds curriculum documents. We do all the PD for secondary math and all that kind of stuff. But in our PD sessions, we talk about project-based learning. Right. We talk about that different style of teaching to get kids involved. More or less of us standing in front of the classroom, telling them exactly what to do, rather than taking a problem, investigating it, and then coming back and having a discussion about it. So, but, you know, some of us as educators, we get comfortable in teaching the way we've been teaching for the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And we don't want to adjust to this new norm or our new society or the new way of learning. And I think that's one thing that as educators, we have to be able to adapt. We have to be able to grow and take hold of this new form of learning with project-based learning and letting kids investigate things on their own. Because just offering them information does not always make them better. It makes them reliable upon you rather than reliable upon their own self for their own learning.
And I'm gonna chime in. And he says, what about communication? The ability to communicate one's idea is in a concise manner. Is this being lost? How does STEM influence your ability to communicate?
Okay, I can tackle that one. Albert Einstein once said that if you can't explain something simply, then you don't fully understand it. And I agree with him wholeheartedly with that. So these topics that we discuss and that we're into are pretty complex. They can get very difficult the higher you go up the ladder. So your ability to turn something complex into something concrete bridges the gap between the people who are laymen versus those who are experts in the field. So all of us as educators, we are teaching children. They are not experts in the field. So how do we turn these concepts into something that they can understand? Well, you have to master it yourself. How can you talk about this subject as we've been discussing, in something that they deal with day to day? And if you can do that, you've bridged that communication gap in a sense that where they keep complaining about they don't understand it, I'm not good at it. Well, now they can be. They may not be good at it, but I would kind of amend that and say you're not good at it just yet.
Right.
I stress the idea behind vocally explaining what you're doing. That's one thing I like to, and that's why I really don't like the virtual learning setting that we're in right now. Because when my kids were in the classroom, it's easier to get them to open their mouth and explain what they're saying versus them sitting behind a computer, because my district is still completely virtual at the moment. So we have our difficulties in that, but at the same time, when kids are able to vocally explain what they are learning and the problem that they're working on, I feel like they are better communicators with the topic that they're talking about. And I relate this again back to statistics. I was an AP stats teacher for about 3 years. And one of the things that we had to stress was students being able to write their answers out and write it in context of their problem. Right. And so teaching that communication aspect across all the math disciplines is important. In North Carolina, it's Math 1, Math 2, Math 3, Math 4, pre-cal, and all that. So being able to communicate in all those different branches and all those different levels is essential. So we stress the importance of being able to communicate what you're doing and vocally expressing those ideas and those concepts.
And STEM teaches that. It teaches a logical communication. You should be, like my kids struggle. I'm doing everything virtual too. Again, I'm teaching 3rd grade. So for me to turn off my microphone and say, hey, you know, I don't want to hear from anyone. I want you to use that chat box. And you have kids pecking away at that chat box. That chat box is hilarious, but they have adjusted. Now, last year around this time, kids were struggling. Well, last year in March, kids were struggling to be able to get a full sentence, but you could see who were writers, who could communicate written. And that's a skill that you still must have. And so it encourages and it shows you that, hey, you may have to learn a new language in order to be able to communicate with some people you may not know, or some people that you do know, and that can come in coding or not. So it's still learning to be able to not just verbalize yourself, but to be able to work on those written skills too.
Right. And I think sometimes we get lost in STEM education to where, because it can become so complex, is that we make it too complex for kids to understand. So I can't explain it to you. So by simplifying it, and a lot of times I use a reverse tactic. So instead of us building something up to communicate, let's break it apart. So look at this car. What do you notice about this car that's not right? What would cause this car to not work? By you creating things like, I remember when we were little, when we got to stay outside all day because I was one of the ones to get outside. We used to take, after it would rain in the city, you know, you got the water that ran down the street on the side into the sewer, right? We would race leaves down there. A buddy of mine, this guy's, I don't know why he's not an astronaut. He ran in the house, got a meat packet, got a stick, got a piece of paper. He had this whole wind sail that he was going to try to put in this little channel of water. And the greatest conversation came from that because we talked about why that wouldn't work. So a lot of times you have to steer conversation to why it doesn't work. Talking about, well, it's too big, there's not enough wind, the weight of it. So now you're taking things that are very complex, but you're keeping it simple. Why won't this work? That's how you always work with that communication. Because a lot of times kids can't build things, but they can take things apart, especially your males. Think about how many times as a male you took something apart and like, oh, I don't know how that goes back together, but I can take it apart. So that's how you use that communication in the opposite way. Hey, let's break this down to create more context and more conversation than trying to build it up when I really don't understand it.
Brother Barnaby, go ahead.
Yeah, I always put the onus on the parents or the adults when it comes to producing these tangible results for the children. So when it comes to the community's involvement in terms of encouragement, it's definitely upon us to be able to do that. We're the ones in the driver's seat and the ones who've had the most experience and knowledge before the kids come up. So we have to provide the opportunities and the resources for the children to come through so that they can be encouraged to utilize these resources. There's a neighborhood not too far from here in Jersey where the parents got together and decided to use their resources to convince the local politician to redraw the district lines so that a specific school was now in their neighborhood so their kids could actually go there because this particular school had a bunch more resources. They pushed a lot of academics and all of that at that school. They were able to do that. So if we had that type of mindset as well, plus the resource, because they had money, they had deep pockets, so they had that too. But if we had that type of mindset where we were effectively moving things around to suit our best interests, then you can see the results that those things would produce. And then everybody, as Mr. Smith was saying, that everybody wants to come to the school now because now we have all these things that help out the community. The school, typically when you walk in, you see by the gym, there's a case full of trophies that the sports teams have won over the years. But this school has an academic one instead. They don't have a trophy case for the sports teams. And they push that narrative so much that multiple parents are sending their students forcefully to that school just to be able to have access to that resource. So we need to be able to do the same thing. We need access to these resources, which produces these results, which then encourages everybody else to get involved.
Real quick, 10 seconds. What is your final word when it comes to the impact of STEM on urban students? Brother Barnaby.
So our impact on Black students, always be the smartest person in the room. Once you're the smartest person in the room, you become the authority on the subject. When you're the authority on the subject, people come to you for advice, and that's power.
That is power. That is absolutely power, Brother Smith.
Flip it. Once upon a time, they told us it was, boy, you can't do that. You need to learn to work with your hands. Flip that. Learn to work with your hands and continue to build your capacity within your mind. When you can control your mind and you can use these hands, man, you have everything you need. You won't want for anything. So flip it.
Flip it. Got it. Brother Freeman.
Freeman, oh man, listen, I want to go off what Brother Carver said. Start with where you are and build what you have already. A lot of times we got to start with a strong foundation. Not a lot of times, all the time and every time we need to start with a strong foundation. Let's start with our kids doing well and let's build on that.
All right, and Brother Cobb, go ahead.
Our Black students are necessary. That's the one thing we need to remember. They are necessary for our society to grow and to prosper. And the STEM field will let them do that. If we can get them in it, get them to prosper in it and to grow in it, they'll build a great future for all of the Black community.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your expertise.